The neon lights of the skyline flickered, casting long, jittery shadows across the pavement. Zhao Ming stood at the edge of the city, his suitcase dragging against his palm with the dead weight of his final paycheck. 5 years of relentless movement had led to this exact spot: a locked office door, a bank account hovering near zero, and a phone that remained silent. He pulled the device from his pocket, the screen dark and unresponsive. No notifications, no missed calls, no future prospects waiting in the digital ether. The city hummed with a frantic, artificial energy that felt like a mockery of his exhaustion. He had chased the fast life through startups and corporate ladders, betting every resource on trends that dissolved before he could catch them. Now, the noise of the traffic and the glare of the billboards felt like physical pressure against his temples. He looked up at the towering glass structures, their windows reflecting nothing but his own stillness. The hustle had finally stopped, leaving him with nothing but the suitcase and the cold air. He took a breath, the metallic taste of the city thick in his lungs, and turned his back on the grid. He did not look back. He walked toward the station, leaving the flickering lights behind. The train rattled, a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that pulled him further from the grid. Outside the window, the jagged glass skyline smoothed into rolling hills and dark, dormant fields. The air inside the carriage grew stale, but as the train slowed to a halt, a new scent drifted through: damp earth and pine. He stepped onto the wooden platform. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, pressing against his ears like a physical weight. No sirens, no distant hum of traffic, only the faint, rhythmic lowing of cattle somewhere in the distance. Zhao Ming walked the dirt path. The farmhouse appeared, a steady, unmoving silhouette against the dusk. His grandfather sat on the porch, hands moving with practiced precision as he mended a leather harness. The old man raised his head. His eyes were sharp, mapping the exhaustion and the defeat etched into Zhao Ming's features. Zhao Ming sank onto the wooden steps, the wood creaking under his weight. He stared at his hands, still trembling from the residual vibration of the city. The silence of the farm felt like an interrogation. He could not look at the old man. He felt the sharp, steady gaze of his grandfather tracking every movement. "I failed," Zhao Ming whispered. The words felt thin and brittle in the open air. He waited for the lecture, for the disappointment. Instead, the old man set the leather harness aside with a soft, rhythmic click. He stood up, his joints popping in the quiet. He walked past Zhao Ming toward the edge of the porch, looking out over the garden where the soil lay dormant and dark. He did not turn around. He gestured toward the rows of empty, waiting earth. "No," the old man replied, his voice steady and devoid of malice. "You just do not understand yet." Zhao Ming looked up, his brow furrowing. The statement hung in the air, a riddle that refused to resolve. The old man turned back to the house, leaving Zhao Ming alone on the steps, his mind turning over the words, a flicker of curiosity beginning to replace the cold weight of his defeat. The sky was still a bruised, deep purple when a hand gripped his shoulder. Zhao Ming jolted awake, the transition from the warmth of the bed to the biting chill of the room, immediate and jarring. His grandfather stood over him, already dressed for the day, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. "Come," the old man commanded, his voice cutting through the lingering haze of sleep. Zhao Ming rose, his muscles stiff, and followed the steady rhythm of footsteps out into the yard. The air was sharp, tasting of frost and dormant earth. It stung his lungs with every breath, stripping away the last remnants of his city-induced lethargy. They reached the edge of the field, where the ground stretched out in a long, dark expanse. The silence of the countryside was absolute. His grandfather stopped, reached into the shed, and pulled out a heavy iron spade. The metal was dull, pitted with age, and cold to the touch. "Dig," the old man said. Zhao Ming looked at the vast, unyielding field and then at the spade. He tightened his grip, the metal biting into his skin. Zhao Ming drove the spade into the earth. The ground did not yield. It fought back. The blade skidded against the packed clay, jarring his shoulders and sending a shockwave of vibration up his arms. He gritted his teeth, reset his stance, and pushed again with his boot. The soil moved only an inch. He repeated the motion, over and over, the rhythm becoming a grueling, repetitive cycle. Within 20 minutes, the cold air felt irrelevant. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes, and his breath came in ragged, uneven gasps. He stopped, leaning heavily on the handle, and looked down at his palms. The skin was raw, red, and beginning to blister. He looked at the patch of ground he had cleared, a shallow, pathetic depression. There was nothing here, just cold, stubborn dirt. "This is pointless," he shouted, his voice cracking. The ground remained unmoved, a dark, frozen wall that offered no reward. The rhythm of his labor was mechanical, a desperate attempt to burn off the resentment building in his gut. He plunged the spade down again, his muscles screaming for rest. Then, a jarring, metallic thud vibrated through his hands. It was not the dull resistance of clay or the sharp ping of a stone. It was a deep, resonant thud that traveled up his arms and settled in his chest. Zhao Ming froze. He pulled the blade back, but the ground held firm. He dropped the spade, fell to his knees, and began to claw at the earth with his bare hands. The soil was damp and cool under his fingernails. He dug deeper, sweeping away layers of packed dirt until his fingers brushed against something thick, gnarled, and textured. He tore more earth away, his breath hitching as the object emerged. It was a root, massive, knotted, and sprawling. It coiled through the dark soil like a subterranean river. He traced its girth, stunned by its sheer scale. Above the surface, only a few withered, brown stalks had been visible, suggesting nothing but decay. He sat back on his heels, his hands stained dark with soil, staring at the hidden architecture of the earth. The silence of the farm no longer felt empty. It felt heavy with a secret. Zhao Ming remained on his knees, his fingers still pressed against the rough, living wood of the root. The scale of it was impossible to ignore. He thought of his years in the city, the frantic networking, the desperate need for immediate validation, the startups that rose and vanished in a single quarter. He had been trying to build a canopy without ever planting a seed. His grandfather moved closer, the soft thud of his boots against the soil drawing Zhao Ming out of his trance. The old man leaned on his own shovel, his gaze fixed on the tangled network beneath them. "For months," the old man said, "this plant has been growing. It was not wasting time. It was building a foundation." Zhao Ming looked up. The shame hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had spent 5 years chasing the fast life, measuring his worth by the speed of his ascent, never once considering what held him up. "You wanted quick growth," his grandfather continued, his tone devoid of judgment but heavy with truth. "But quick growth is weak growth. Strong things take time." He stood up slowly, his legs trembling from the exertion, and finally understood the cost of his impatience. The weeks that followed blurred into a singular, steady rhythm. Every morning, the sky was a bruised purple when the cold air bit into his skin, signaling the start of the day. Zhao Ming stopped checking his pockets for his phone. It sat on the wooden table inside, silent and ignored, its screen gathering dust. He carried heavy buckets of water across the uneven ground until his shoulders burned. He spent hours clearing jagged stones from the rows, his palms hardening into calluses that felt like armor. The earth did not demand his ambition. It only required his consistency. He learned to read the soil by its moisture and the way it crumbled under his grip. He stopped looking for the next big thing and focused entirely on the weight of the spade and the texture of the dirt. One morning, as the sun began to bleed over the horizon, he knelt in the field to inspect his work. A tiny, vibrant green shoot had broken through the surface. It was fragile, barely a sliver of life, yet it stood firm against the biting wind. He stared at the sprout, realizing it had not just appeared. It had been preparing for this moment for weeks, hidden away in the dark, gathering strength while he watched. Zhao Ming looked at his grandfather, who stood nearby, his face softened by the morning light. "I understand now," Zhao Ming said, his voice steady and clear. "It is not about the harvest. It is about the work done when no one is watching." His grandfather reached into his pocket and produced a heavy burlap bucket filled with seeds. He held it out, the weight of the gesture passing between them. "Most people quit because they cannot see the progress," the old man said, his gaze fixed on the field. "They think they are failing because the surface is empty. They do not realize they are standing right above their own roots." Zhao Ming took the bucket. The rough fabric felt solid against his palms. He walked to the edge of the freshly turned soil and knelt. He did not rush. He took a single seed, pressed it into the dark, cool earth, and covered it with a gentle layer of dirt. He repeated the motion. One seed, One movement, one breath. He was no longer running from the failures of his past or chasing the hollow promises of the city. The frantic energy that had defined his life for years had evaporated, replaced by a calm, deliberate focus. He moved down the row, his back straight, his hands stained with the soil he had once dismissed as nothing. Each seed he planted was a commitment to a future he could not yet see, but one he knew would endure. He worked until the sun reached its zenith, his rhythm unbroken. He was building something that would last, one day at a time, beneath the surface where it mattered most. The field was no longer a place of exile, but the foundation of his own life.